Look, I get it. Bolt-action rifles are by no means a meta weapon, but they are incredibly enjoyable to use. Whether you're sniping people's heads from long distance or just simply trying to get your quests done, you might be wondering, what is the best bolt-action rifle in Escape from Tarkov? So today we're going to be diving into what is the quietest, best bolt, and also the best drop-off across a wide variety of different bolt actions so you can choose the right one for you. Now, obviously, all the footage here today was actually filmed live on my Twitch, and the link for that will be featured down in the description below if you want to catch me making some of these type of videos live. Now, obviously, the VPO 215 is going to be the cheapest bolt action on the market, coming in at 15,000 rubles sometimes on the flea, which is amazing. The Mosin follows close behind here, around 37,000 rubles, sometimes cheaper, to upwards of about 50,000 at max. What's cool as well is the SV98 firing the same caliber can also be cheaper from Pratpor and is also a really viable option firing that 7.6254. For 51 NATO, we have the DVL, which is one of the most common here at 60,000 rubles, as well as the T5000 Ursus, which is roughly around 50,000 rubles at the moment on the flea, which to me is incredibly low. You've also got the Remington M700, one of the more iconic 51 NATOs, but we've got the 45,000 ruble average here being pretty decent. You can also buy some kitted out M700s from Jaeger once you do a couple tasks with different types of bodies on it. The M700 being definitely the most moddable out of all the bolt action rifles, allowing you to throw on many different attachments, boost that ergo, and also lower the recoil. If we do a side-by-side comparison between the SV98 and the Mosin, immediately you'll be noticing that the SV98 is pretty much better in every single imaginable way, except for weight, than its cousin, the Mosin. If we compare a fully kitted out SV98 versus a fully kitted out Mosin, the main difference being here that the Mosin has worse ergo, but better overall recoil and muzzle velocity. Now, this is actually sort of competitive, but I would never really use a Mosin like this because of that ergo, so I would always recommend using the SV98 in this caliber anyway. So when it comes down to 7.6251 NATO, you'll straight up notice that the T5000 in the middle wins in terms of ergo, and on the far left, the DVL actually wins out in terms of recoil. But the sad part about all of this is that the M700 statistically wise stock has so much more of both recoil and also way worse ergo. You see a lot of people will go out of their way to build M700s with hundreds of thousands of rubles worth of attachments. And that is all well and good because the gun is incredibly sexy, and I do respect people that go out and build this gun anyway. But when it comes down to it, I can explain why if you were to spend upwards of 200,000 rubles on an M7 to get it lower, it wouldn't really matter anyway. In terms of being fully kitted out, far left we have the DVL here, in the middle the T5, and on the far right a very kitted M700. Straight away you'll notice the M700, although it is far more expensive to build it this way, actually classes out in ergonomics and recoil. But the other two being considerably cheaper also compare across the board to the M7 anyway. Another reason to choose the DVL here is that you can buy a power filter for around 50,000 rubles sometimes and trade for a suppressed DVL with the barrel from Skier Max, which is actually really solid. But is there more to Bolties than simply just ergo and recoil? And that is actually a really interesting question that I get asked a fair bit. And I can actually explain why you actually need to choose more than simply just ergo and recoil. There is a lot of things when it comes down to Bolties, whether that be weight or actual bolt animation, that can actually make a huge difference. If we look at the bolts here side by side, I'm going to be firing off that very expensive M700, and I want you to pay attention to a few things. The first one is going to be that recoil. You can see that vertical recoil on the climb and then eventually the reset. If we slow it down and look again, you can see that the climb isn't really that bad. But where it gets really bad is the bolt. Once I let go of the trigger, you can notice there's a lot of scope shaking. And if we slow down the bolt animation to about 10% here, we can straight away notice it can be very disorientating. A a lot of the time if you are trying to take long distance shots with an M700, although it has incredibly low recoil, you will still have a lot of downtime between your shots where you're not watching the target. When we speed this up, it doesn't look so bad, however, but you can see that shaking motion is quite violent. Now, if we switch over to the DVL, straight away you'll notice the recoil isn't really that bad, but the bolt animation is pretty heavy. We're going to pull hard down towards the left to rack the bolt, and the time where we're looking down at the ground can actually be quite significant. The main difference here really being that I feel like the animation overall is less disorientating than the M7. And the reset time on the T5000 is absolutely phenomenally good. And this is really good for long distance shooting and a really important reason why I like the T5000 for maps like Woods, and simply allows you to keep your eyes on your target at distance for longer. This is because of the straight pull bolt on the T5000, making the overall animation so much smoother and easier to keep eyes on the target, as well as the fact that the recoil is non-existent. If we look at the three side by side, you can see the T5000 in the middle is a lot better, with the M700 having multiple problems with eye relief and constantly swinging left and right, making it very disorientating. The DVL can be very predictable by pulling hard left and then simply just resetting. Now, when it comes down to suppressors, there's actually a new stat that got added recently called loudness, and loudness actually affects how loud the gun is when suppressed. And you can see something like the Sig Sauer SRD here actually has a 35 reduction in loudness, making it one of the highest loudness reducing suppressors in the game, followed by the PRS KAC suppressor here for 7.62, coming close behind at 30. I'm glad they finally got around to adding a stat like this to all the individual suppressors in the game, giving you a reason to choose them over simply just ergonomics and recoil. The main thing though I wanted to point out is that something like the Bramit for the Mosin is actually incredibly bad on the loudness stat, but it actually reduces the default sound of the gun. So if the gun is actually default quieter than its competitor, then even though the suppressor is worse, it will still be quieter. So for the sake of not talking your ear off, I'm going to just play some gentle music here and you guys can listen for yourself the difference between binaural and non-binaural sound for all of the different types of Bolties at different ranges. So we weren't 100% satisfied with all the results. We went in multiple times and we actually tested the different Bolties at range. And we also started to notice some weird behavior with the Bolties where even though one would say it was quieter in terms of peak decibels, the sound itself was actually harder to distinguish. And as well as the fact that around 100 meters, it didn't matter whether we had ears on, with or without binaural sound, it actually became impossible to hear any type of suppressed Bolty at 100 meters. So what do you guys think is the best bolt action in Escape from Tarkov? I actually have a few couple favorites, and it really just depends on the map for me. When it comes down to woods, I absolutely love the T5000, and when it comes to other maps, I personally am a big believer in the DVL. The little mouse fart itself is an incredibly fun little cannon to use. If you guys enjoyed this video and would like to see this for other calibers of guns, let me know what caliber you'd like to see next in the description down below. Thanks so much for watching to the very end, and as always, we'll see you on the next one.